Welcome to today's Explainer. When we think about World War II, it's so easy to just get lost in the sheer scale of the whole thing, right? The staggering statistics, the massive global troop movements, those endless tactical maps. But today, we're taking a completely different approach. We're zooming way, way in to look at this massive conflict through a much more intimate lens. We're going to follow the unbelievable true story of two ordinary Americans caught right in the terrifying chaos of December 1944, a young U.S. Army soldier named Jack and his fiancée Elizabeth. Basically, this is a story about how when the entire world was quite literally falling apart, a simple piece of paper could hold a person's universe together.
Okay, let's dive into this. Just think about the absolutely massive contrast between our world today and back then. Nowadays, if you want to know if someone's safe, what do? You shoot them a quick text, maybe hop on a video call, and boom, you've got an answer in seconds. But in 1944, for couples like Jack and Elizabeth, their reality was muddy trenches and literally weeks of agonizing waiting. Every single day apart felt like an absolute lifetime. The only bridge, the only connection between the safety of home and the terrifying unknown of the European theater was the Postal Service.
Which brings us to Section 1, A Promise Across Oceans.
You see, the personal stakes here were incredibly high. Before Jack even stepped foot on a boat heading for Europe, he made a really solemn vow to Elizabeth. He promised her that no matter what went down, no matter where the war dragged him, he would write to her every single chance he got. And the crazy thing is, he actually kept that promise. Keep in mind, he wasn't sitting at some cozy mahogany desk. He was scribbling these letters from freezing, muddy trenches, makeshift military camps, and active battlefields. Imagine the sheer willpower it took to just sit down in those terrifying conditions and put pen to paper. These letters then had to travel thousands of miles, crossing oceans and active war zones, sometimes taking weeks to finally arrive. But despite all the grime and the insane delays, every single envelope that made it across the Atlantic carried the one thing that mattered most: hope. Because for Elizabeth back home, letters were everything. I mean, literally everything. They dictated her entire daily routine. Every morning, her very first thought was checking that mailbox. Every evening, she'd sit down and meticulously reread his older letters. In a time completely devoid of our modern instant communications, these fragile pieces of paper were her only tangible proof that the man she loved was actually still out there, still fighting and still alive.
But then we hit Section 2, the terrifying silence.
As we all know, war is incredibly unpredictable. And soon enough, that fragile lifeline was completely severed. We're entering one of the absolute darkest periods of the entire war for the Allied forces here, a moment where the course of history and the lives of Jack and Elizabeth hung entirely in the balance. In December 1944, German forces launched this massive, desperate surprise attack against the Allies, which we now know as the Battle of the Bulge. Suddenly, thousands of American soldiers, Jack included, were totally surrounded by fierce, relentless fighting. And the immediate consequence of that, communication became impossible. Mail deliveries didn't just slow down, they came to a dead stop. Just picture Elizabeth's morning routine now. She walks out to the mailbox, she opens it, and nothing. Days start bleeding into weeks. That reassuring, steady flow of handwriting from the trenches simply vanishes. No letters. And the anxiety just compounds, right? Because as those agonizing weeks turn into months, there are no phone calls she can fall back on. There's zero official information coming from the military to let families know who's safe or who's surrounded. It was just nothing. The silence on the home front must have been absolutely deafening for Elizabeth and honestly for countless other families across America staring at empty mailboxes. This terrifying void of information led them to fear the absolute worst. The man she loved had seemingly vanished into the freezing chaos of the European winter. Moving on to Section 3, the letter that survived. Now, picture a snowy afternoon back in the States. Elizabeth goes out to the mailbox, probably just out of sheer habit at this point. And finally, there it is, a letter. The envelope is practically destroyed. The paper inside is all stained. But instantly, her heart leaps because she recognizes Jack's handwriting. And inside, he didn't sugarcoat what he was going through. He described the freezing, bitter weather. He confessed to the profound fear and uncertainty of being trapped and surrounded. He even wrote about the friends he had lost in the fighting. But to balance out all that darkness, he wrote about the one dream that was keeping him pushing forward: coming home, seeing Elizabeth again, simply surviving this extraordinary nightmare just so he could live an ordinary life and start a family. At the very end of that letter, Jack penned a sentence that is just truly unforgettable. He wrote, "If faith can carry a nation through war, then love can carry two people through anything." And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer emotional climax of their story. Just imagine Elizabeth reading those words, the stained, battered paper trembling in her hands, completely brought to tears. For the very first time in months, that terrifying silence was broken by a profound, renewed sense of hope.
Which brings us to Section 4, Victory and Reunion. And boy, that hope was fiercely needed, because the battles kept raging across Europe, bringing more freezing winters and seemingly impossible dangers. Thousands more Americans tragically sacrificed their lives. But Jack, he kept fighting. And, remarkably, he kept writing. Finally, in 1945, the war in Europe officially comes to an end. There is this absolute, incredible eruption of joy all across America. Church bells are ringing out in every single town. Massive crowds are pouring into the streets. And then, the moment so many families had been desperately praying for, returning soldiers, including Jack, finally began arriving home by train. When Jack's train pulled into that station, Elizabeth was right there waiting for him. The embrace they shared after all those years of terror and separation, witnesses described it as simply unforgettable. Because it wasn't just a grand victory for a nation, it was a deeply personal triumph. It serves as this really powerful reminder of exactly what millions of people endured on the home front. You know, parents, spouses, kids, all just waiting, holding their breath for that one unforgettable embrace. And finally, Section 5, The Legacy of Love.
Jack and Elizabeth's micro-story. That terrifying wait, the surviving letter, their beautiful reunion, it had a happy ending. They actually ended up getting married, building a family, and spending decades together. But their macro-historical legacy, that lives on in the very letters they so meticulously preserved. So the crucial point is what these artifacts mean for us today. When you walk through a museum or look through historical archives, you'll find letters exactly like Jack's. And what do they represent? They're stories of incredible courage, of profound heartbreak, and of incredibly resilient hope. They remind us that history isn't just made by generals in war rooms. It's made by ordinary Americans facing extraordinary, truly terrifying challenges. These little pieces of paper tell the profound human stories that statistics and troop maps simply never can.
It completely reframes how we look at the conflict, doesn't it? World War II wasn't only fought with tanks, airplanes, and rifles. It was fought with faith. It was fought with this immense internal determination. And it was fought with this steadfast, absolutely unwavering belief that one day, the people we love would eventually come home.
I want to leave you with this final, really powerful thought drawn straight from their story. The war tested a nation, love carried them through it. As you go about your day today, maybe with instant messaging right there in your pocket, I want you to ask yourself, how much power does human connection really hold when we are faced with our darkest historical moments? Thank you so much for exploring this remarkable piece of history with me today, and I really encourage you to seek out the preserved letters of the past. They have so much left to teach us.